My hands, once so strong, so full of purpose, now tremble when I lift even a cup of tea. The skin is wrinkled, the veins rise like rivers, and the calluses tell a story no one seems to care about anymore. But I remember how these hands stitched clothes late into the night, the needle-piercing fabric while my eyes burned with exhaustion. I remember kneading dough before dawn, making sure hot bread was ready before my children left for school. I remember washing, scrubbing, cleaning, never pausing. Because if I paused, who would take care of them? When my husband died young, these hands became both mother and father. They tilled the land, carried buckets of water, cut wood for the fire. They earned money in the market selling whatever I could grow, whatever I could make. I did not complain. My heart whispered one day, all this will give them a better life. One day they will see, and they did see. Once. I still recall the joy in their faces when I bought their first school uniforms. My oldest son hugged me tightly and said, "Ma, when I grow up, I'll take care of you. These hands of yours won't need to work anymore." My heart swelled, and I kissed his forehead, believing his words like a sacred promise. Years passed. Those uniforms turned into graduation gowns. The same hands that once held my fingers now held diplomas. They left for the city, for big jobs, for lives far away from the little home I had built. At first, I waited eagerly for their visits. I cooked their favorite meals, kept the house spotless, and counted the days until I would hear their laughter again. They came sometimes, bringing gifts, praising me in front of neighbors. Our mother sacrificed everything for us. Look what she did with her bare hands. But slowly the visits grew fewer, the calls shorter, the gratitude quieter. Now when they do come, they no longer look at my hands with respect. They frown when I drop a spoon, sigh when I move too slowly. Once my daughter even whispered, "Why is Ma always shaking? She can't even serve tea properly anymore." Her words cut me deeper than any wound these hands ever bore. They don't see the years these hands carried them, fed them, clothed them. They only see weakness. They only see age. One evening, while we all sat together, my son glanced at my trembling fingers and muttered, "Ma, you should stop trying to do everything. Just rest. You're old now. We'll manage." But it wasn't kindness. It was dismissal, as if to say, "You're no longer useful." I smiled faintly, but inside my heart cracked, because usefulness was all I had ever known. These hands had built their future brick by brick, yet now they were treated like relics of a forgotten past. That night I lay awake staring at them in the dim light. Every wrinkle, every scar, every callus whispered back memories. The time I burned myself cooking on a cheap stove so my children could eat. The time I bled from sewing needles but finished uniforms so they wouldn't feel different from richer classmates. The times I carried heavy baskets on my back so they could carry only books in theirs. I whispered to myself, "You are not useless. You carried the weight of generations. You built a future they now take for granted." Tears slid down my cheeks, not from weakness but from the deep loneliness of being unseen. Still, I did not complain to them. I chose silence, as I always had. But inside something stirred. Perhaps, I thought, if they cannot see the worth of these hands, then maybe I must show the world that hands are not valuable because they are steady, but because they never gave up. Because what defines us is not what we hold in our hands now, but what we built with them yesterday. The following weeks only deepened the ache inside me. My children were busy, always busy. They rushed through meals, rushed through conversations, rushed through life. And I sat in the corner, quiet, invisible, watching the same children I once held so tightly slip further away from me. It was not the silence that hurt the most. It was the indifference. I remember one morning I tried to fold my granddaughter's dress. My hands shook as I struggled with the fabric. My daughter-in-law came in, sighed heavily, and took it from me. "It's okay, Ma, I'll do it. You'll just wrinkle it more." She didn't mean to be cruel, but her words echoed in my heart. You'll just wrinkle it more. Wrinkles. Was that all they saw now? Not wisdom, not love, not sacrifice. Just wrinkles. I wanted to scream, to remind her that these same wrinkled hands once folded tiny clothes for her husband, my son, when he was smaller than her daughter, that I had washed, ironed, and mended until my fingers bled. But the words stuck in my throat. I simply nodded and stepped aside, my dignity folding smaller than the dress in her hands. Another time, my son came home late from work. He looked tired, burdened. I offered to massage his shoulders just as I had done when he studied late nights for his exams years ago. He pulled away gently, almost impatiently. "It's fine, Ma. You don't need to fuss over me anymore." Fuss. That word cut me. Once my touch was comfort, safety, healing. Now it was annoyance. In those moments, I began to feel like furniture in my own home. Present, but unnoticed. Useful once, but now simply there. I started to sit longer in my room, gazing at my hands as if they held the answers to the questions tormenting me. Was I truly useless now? Did my worth expire the moment my hands grew weak? But then, memories flooded me again. Nights of hunger when I ate less, so my children could eat more. Days of blistering sun when I worked in fields while they studied in classrooms. Winters when I patched the same shawl again and again, so they would not feel the cold. No, I was not useless. My hands may tremble now, but they once carried mountains. The real burden was not the weakness of my body. It was the weight of being forgotten. One Sunday, all my children came together. I thought perhaps this time would be different, that we would share stories, laugh like we used to. Instead, they sat around the table talking about work, promotions, investments. They spoke of houses, cars, travels. Not once did they ask how I was. I sat quietly sipping tea. They laughed loudly, their words rushing over me like waves against a rock. I was present yet absent, a shadow at my own table. I looked at my hands gripping the cup. They trembled slightly, spilling a drop. My son frowned. "Careful, Ma. Don't spill on the table." That was all he said. In that moment, something inside me broke. I realized that my children, my own flesh and blood, saw me not as the foundation of their lives, but as a fragile inconvenience. The very hands that once carried them across rivers of hardship were now seen as clumsy, troublesome. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, not for myself, but for them, for their blindness, for the way success had closed their eyes to the roots that nourished them. But as the tears fell, a new thought entered my heart. Perhaps it was not blindness alone. Perhaps they truly believed I was fine. Perhaps they thought their gifts and money were enough. Perhaps they never understood that what a mother needs most is not comfort, not luxury, but connection. I wiped my tears and whispered to myself, I will not let bitterness take root. If they have forgotten, I will remind them. Not with anger, but with stories, with truth. One day, they will see. I began writing down my memories on scraps of paper in old notebooks. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every small triumph. I wrote of the nights without sleep, the days without food, the dreams I carried for them. I poured my heart into those pages, not as complaint, but as testimony, because I knew if my voice trembled, my words could still stand strong. And so, I continued day after day to hold on to dignity, to speak less with bitterness and more with quiet strength. My hands may not build homes anymore, but they could still build truth. And maybe, just maybe, one day, they would remember. The days turned into months, and though my heart still ached, I began to find small ways to keep my spirit alive. When my family did not notice me, I started noticing others. At the temple, I saw an old woman sitting quietly outside. Her sari faded, her back bent. No one paid attention to her. I sat beside her one morning and simply held her hand. She looked at me with startled eyes. then smiled weakly. That single smile reminded me I was not alone in my invisibility. Many of us carried stories no one bothered to hear anymore. Soon I began talking to other elders in the community. Widows, mothers, grandmothers, all with wrinkled hands, trembling voices, and hearts heavy with unspoken memories. They told me of children who never called, of letters unanswered, of money sent but love withheld. Each story was a mirror of my own pain. Yet in sharing, something beautiful happened. We no longer felt forgotten. Together, we were remembered. One day, a young girl from the neighborhood came to visit. She had heard that I knew how to embroider. "Auntie, will you teach me?" "My mother doesn't know." Her words lit a spark in me. My hands, though slower, still remembered the patterns of flowers and stars. I took out my old basket of threads I thought would never be used again. As I showed her how to guide the needle, I realized, though my children may not value my skills, someone else could. Teaching her, I felt alive again. My wrinkles no longer seemed a weakness. They became proof of experience. My trembling hands became teachers' hands. From then on, more children came. Some wanted to learn stitching, others just wanted to listen. I told them stories while they practiced, weaving tales of courage, sacrifice, and kindness into the fabric of their young hearts. Their laughter filled my home in a way that silence had once choked it. When my family saw the children gathered around me, they raised their eyebrows. "Ma, why trouble yourself with these kids? You should rest." I smiled. They did not understand. Rest is not the absence of work. It is the presence of peace. And I had found peace in giving. At night, I returned to my writings. Page after page, I described my journey, not as a victim, but as a witness of love, struggle, and endurance. Words became my shield against despair. If my children forgot, the world would not. My story would outlive their neglect. But the real turning point came during a festival. My children were busy preparing decorations, rushing here and there. They barely acknowledged me. I sat aside, watching. Then one of the little girls I taught came running, holding a handmade card. On it were shaky letters. "Thank you, Auntie, for teaching me. You are like my grandmother." Tears filled my eyes. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes family is not only given by blood, but chosen by love. That night, as lamps glowed and songs echoed, I prayed silently. God, if my own children cannot see me, let me still be seen by others. If my own house does not hold my place, let my heart still hold others. From then on, I embraced a new rhythm. Each morning, I welcomed whoever knocked at my door. Each afternoon, I wrote a little more of my truth. Each evening, I reminded myself that dignity was not in what others gave me, but in what I carried within. Slowly, the heaviness in my chest eased. My family still overlooked me often, but I no longer measured my worth by their blindness. I found strength in the simple truth. Love is not wasted, even if unseen. The hands that once built a home could still build hope. And though my children had forgotten, I had not forgotten myself. The winter that year was harsh. Cold winds rattled the windows, and my bones ached more than usual. Yet, inside my heart, there was a warmth I hadn't felt in years. The children I taught visited often, bringing laughter, sweets, and even handmade scarves. My little house, once filled with silence, now echoed with joy. One afternoon, as I was stitching with the children, my eldest son walked in unexpectedly. He stopped at the door, startled to see the room alive with chatter. The children sat cross-legged on the floor, holding pieces of cloth, listening as I explained patiently. "What's going on here, Ma?" he asked, his voice half curious, half annoyed. I smiled softly. "I'm teaching them, Beta. They want to learn, and I have time to give," he frowned. "Why trouble yourself? You should be resting." Before I could answer, one of the girls piped up. "Uncle, Auntie teaches us so much. She makes us laugh. She tells us stories. She's amazing." My son's expression shifted. Confusion mixed with something I couldn't read. He said nothing more and left quickly. But that night, I noticed him lingering in the hallway, staring at my hands as I carefully folded the fabric. A week later, I heard him whispering to his wife. I didn't realize Ma still does all this. I thought she was just... His words trailed off, but I understood. He had thought I was finished, that I had nothing left to offer. It wasn't long after that my youngest daughter stumbled upon my notebook. She had come to borrow something, and found it lying open on the table. Pages filled with memories, sacrifices, and silent grief. She read, tears streaming down her cheeks, before running to me. "Ma, why didn't you tell us all this? Why did you hide your pain?" I looked into her eyes and replied gently, "Because my duty was to give, not to burden. I wanted you to fly free without carrying the weight of my struggles." She clutched my trembling hands, her voice breaking. "But we should have known. We should have seen. Forgive us, Ma." Her words pierced me, but not in the way pain does. Rather like light breaking through a dark room. For the first time, one of my children truly saw me, not just as an old woman, but as the hands that had built their tomorrow. A few days later, they all gathered. My sons, my daughters, their families. They sat quietly as I read a portion of my writings aloud. My voice shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of truth. "I do not regret the years of sacrifice," I said, my eyes glistening. "But what hurts is not the work these hands did. It's that the work has been forgotten. Respect is not given by feeding someone when they are strong. It is by remembering them when they are weak." The room fell silent. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others wiped their eyes. My eldest son finally spoke. "Ma, we forgot. We thought giving you comfort meant enough. We didn't realize we had taken your dignity away." I reached out and held his hand. Comfort without respect is like food without taste. You must not only provide for me, but honor the journey that brought you here. From that day forward, something shifted. They began calling more often, sitting beside me, asking for stories of the past. My grandchildren began listening too, wide-eyed as I spoke of struggles they had never known. But I did not depend on their change for my happiness. The fire had already been rekindled within me. My worth was no longer tied to their recognition. It lived in my own heart, in my writings, in the lives of the children I taught. Still, I could see it, the way my family looked at my hands differently now, not with impatience but with awe. They saw not weakness but history, not trembling, but strength. One evening, my eldest son placed his hand gently over mine. "Ma, forgive us. These hands, they built everything we are. We forgot, but we will not forget again." Swires slipped from my eyes as I whispered, "It is never too late to remember." The weeks after that gathering felt different. For the first time in years, my children lingered near me, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to reconnect. My youngest daughter often came into my room just to braid my thinning hair, something she hadn't done since she was a little girl. My eldest son began asking about the recipes I used to cook when they were young, trying to capture the taste of childhood he had long taken for granted. Yet, though their gestures warmed me, I carried no illusions. I knew people forget easily, that life pulls them in many directions. I told myself, their change is good, but my peace cannot depend on it. And so I continued my own work. The children from the neighborhood still visited, and my home became a small school of sorts. They called me Aji, grandmother, even though we shared no blood. Every day their voices filled my home with a melody that healed old wounds. One afternoon, as I guided them through stitching patterns, one boy asked innocently, "Aji, why do your hands shake so much?" His friends hushed him, embarrassed. But I smiled. "These hands shake because they've worked very hard," I explained gently. "They are tired, but they are proud. Every scar, every wrinkle is a medal of love." The children listened silently, as if I had revealed a great truth. For them, my hands were not a weakness. They were living history. Word of my little school spread. Soon neighbors began sending more children. Not only for stitching, but for stories, lessons, even blessings. Some evenings, parents came along, sitting quietly, listening to me speak. Without planning it, I had become a teacher not only of craft, but of life. One day, my eldest son returned from work to find the courtyard filled with children and parents. He stood there, watching, as I told the story of how a single seed grows into a great tree. His eyes softened, and later that night he said, "Ma, I didn't realize how much you still had to give. We thought you needed us, but it seems we needed you more." His words touched me deeply, but I did not let pride overtake me. I only said, "Every tree bends with age, Beta, but even bent trees give shade." From then on, my children encouraged my teaching. They bought me threads and notebooks, even a chair with arms so I could sit comfortably. My granddaughter began helping me write my memoirs more neatly, saying, "Nani, one day, I'll publish your stories." The irony was not lost on me. Once ignored, now celebrated. But I accepted it with humility. Life has a way of circling back, of teaching lessons in unexpected ways. Still, I never let bitterness remain in my heart. When neighbors whispered, "After all you did, your children forgot you for so long," I smiled. They forgot, yes, but forgetting is human. Remembering again, that is grace. At night, as I closed my eyes, I often thought back to those early days of sacrifice, carrying heavy loads, stitching until my fingers bled, cooking on an empty stomach. All those struggles now seemed distant, almost like another lifetime. Yet, they had shaped me into the woman I was. Resilient, patient, unbreakable. And now, as my family slowly learned to honor me again, I realized the most important truth of all. Even if they had never changed, I would still have survived, because strength is not given by others. It is discovered within. My home had become a sanctuary, not of wealth, but of wisdom. My trembling hands had become symbols, not of weakness, but of endurance. And though I could not control how long I would walk this earth, I knew one thing for certain. My story, my love, and my hands would live on. Through my children, through the children I taught, and through the words I left behind. As the seasons passed, my days became fuller than ever. The little school I had begun unintentionally grew into a gathering place. Children came not only to learn embroidery, but also to listen, to feel warmth, to sit in a space where love was steady. Parents thanked me, saying their children spoke of me at home with respect, often repeating my sayings as if they were pearls of wisdom. I had never imagined this would be my life in old age, that after feeling invisible in my own family, I would become a guiding light for so many others. Yet, perhaps this was God's way of showing me that even when those closest to us fail to honor us, our value does not disappear. It simply finds new soil to bloom in. One evening, my granddaughter sat beside me, holding my notebook. She had been helping me organize my stories. "Nani," she said softly, "your life is like a book no one knew was being written. When I read it, I feel proud. You've given so much more than anyone realizes." I placed my hand over hers. "Beta, the value of a seed is not known until it becomes a tree." My hands were the seeds. Your lives, your laughter, your learning. That is the tree. But remember, it is not only for my children. Love is for all. Her eyes shimmered with tears, and I saw in her gaze a respect that had once been missing from her parents. Perhaps it was through the grandchildren that my story would truly live on. One day, the local school invited me to speak on the power of sacrifice. At first, I hesitated. What could an old woman with trembling hands offer to a hall full of bright young students? But when I stood at the podium and looked into their eager faces, words flowed from my heart like a river breaking free from rocks. I spoke of struggle, of carrying burdens without complaint, of love that gives without expecting return. I showed them my hands, letting them see the wrinkles, the scars, the tremors. "These hands may look weak," I said, but they are strong with history. They built futures that others now enjoy. Remember, strength is not in smoothness, but in the scars that tell stories of endurance. When I finished, the hall erupted in applause. Many students stood, some even crying. In that moment, I realized my journey was not only for my family. It was for anyone who felt unseen, anyone who had given without acknowledgement. News of my talk spread. Soon, community groups invited me to share more. Some called me Daddy of Strength. Others simply called me Teacher. For the first time, I was known not only as someone's mother, someone's grandmother, but as myself. A woman whose hands told a story worth remembering. Back at home, my children began seeing me through new eyes. My eldest son once admitted, "Ma, I thought your work ended when you grew old. But now I see. It never ended. It only changed form," I smiled gently. "Work of the body ends, Beta, but work of the heart never does." Over time, my children not only respected me more, they began learning from me. My daughter, who once complained of my slowness, now asked me how I managed to stay patient all those years. My son, who had dismissed me as frail, began consulting me before making big decisions, realizing wisdom is not found in books alone. Yet even with their newfound respect, I held on to one truth. My worth is not in their recognition, but in my existence itself. That truth freed me from bitterness and allowed me to love them again, without fear. As I sat one evening by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought of my journey, from hands that labored in silence, to hands that were forgotten, to hands now seen as symbols of resilience. It was a full circle. But the real gift was not that others remembered me now. The real gift was that I had remembered myself, and I knew, long after my trembling hands stilled, the seeds they planted of sacrifice, patience, and love would continue to bloom in the lives of many, because no hand that gives ever dies forgotten. The monsoon arrived that year with heavy rains, washing the dust from the streets and painting the world in fresh green. I sat by my window listening to the steady rhythm of raindrops, my shawl wrapped tight around my shoulders. My body had grown weaker, but my spirit felt stronger than ever. One by one, my children came to sit with me that evening. They had prepared a small celebration in my honor. Nothing grand, just the family gathered together. My eldest son lit a lamp. My daughter placed flowers near my chair, and my grandchildren sang a song they had practiced. As I looked around, my eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of wonder. The same children who once dismissed me now sat with reverence. The same house that once echoed with silence now buzzed with warmth. "Ma," my eldest son began, his voice thick with emotion. "We cannot change the years we forgot, but we promise you this. We will not forget again. Your sacrifices, your strength, your love will live in us." I smiled softly, my hands trembling as I reached out to touch his cheek. Beta, forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about building the future with open hearts. I have already forgiven you. What matters is that you see me now. The room grew quiet, and in that silence, I felt a bond that words could not capture. My children's eyes met mine, not with guilt anymore, but with gratitude. My grandchildren clutched my hands as if they were treasures, not burdens. Later that night, after everyone had gone to rest, I remained awake, my thoughts traveling across the years. I saw myself young again, carrying water, stitching clothes, feeding hungry mouths. I saw myself middle-aged, alone but determined, pushing through pain with only hope as my companion. I saw myself older, forgotten, aching with loneliness. And I saw myself now, aged, frail, but filled with dignity and peace. I whispered to the shadows. These hands were never truly forgotten. Every thread stitched, every meal cooked, every scar endured lives on. Even when they overlooked me, my love was shaping their lives. Even when they ignored me, my spirit was carving their paths. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, and I closed my eyes. I knew the day would come when these hands would finally rest, when my story would reach its last page. But I no longer feared that day, because I had lived, I had given, and I had been remembered, not just by blood, but by all whose lives I had touched. And when I leave this world, I hope my children and grandchildren will not only say, "She worked hard." I hope they will say, "She lived with love. She taught us what strength truly means." Because in the end, that is the legacy I leave behind. Not wealth, not land, but the story of hands that built a future, loved without condition, and never stopped giving, even when forgotten. So if one day you look at your own aging hands and wonder if anyone sees their worth, remember this: hands are not honored for how steady they are today, but for the lives they have carried, the sacrifices they have borne, and the love they have given. And even if the world forgets, God never does.